Andrew, it's a pleasure to have you on the podcast today. How you doing?
Hey, I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on.
No, you're welcome. It's really great to connect with you. And I just kind of thought I'd introduce you, kind of go over your profile a little bit because you're a best-selling author of Stimulated Habits to Spark Your Creative Genius at Work, host of the Consulting Unplugged podcast. You have a lot of experience in consulting and much more. You've helped companies from Pfizer, Bayer, Citigroup, and many more as well. You're a worldwide speaker, Chief Executive Officer, DXD Partners. I think it said you're host of the Consulting Unplugged podcast. Um, how did you kind of get into this kind of like field? Because I know on your profile you talk about like consulting, business.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing. I mean, when I started my career, just to give you sort of quick linear
Yeah,
history of I started right out of university. I worked for a large oil company, British Petroleum, in retail marketing. So I got experience. I didn't know any better other than to gain experience in business. I thought, all right, a corporate job would be a great thing, and it was a great foundation. And then I did my master's in business with an emphasis on organizational behavior early on, and that was a great grounding to this world of consulting because the idea was to provide advice, provide expertise, to coach and counsel other leaders or other teams or other organizations how to solve their business challenge, right? So I really got kind of smitten by that. And then eventually went and joined a large consulting firm called Anderson Consulting at the time, but then later became Accenture. And that's where I cut my teeth on really large corporate kind of consulting, traveled the world, did some really interesting things. But all along the way, I always had this entrepreneurial bug and thought, why don't I put out my own shingle someday? And that's what I did 15 years ago with DXC Partners, doing work around innovation, creativity, business model, innovation and change, and provided services to a number of great clients throughout the world. And because of that experience is cumulative, I started to teach at universities consulting courses. People were asking me to, what is consulting? Whether you're in engineering or finance or technology, there's always a consultative approach to how you do the work, right? You're providing advice or offering a solution, but there's a real strong relationship aspect. So I designed this course called Consulting Unplugged. And then I thought, well, because of the relationships and networks I have, why don't I bring many of the people whom I have coached or counseled or consulted to and bring their voices to that program? So that's how I got to where I am today.
No, that's awesome. And I think like you said, you went into like the corporate world and got a job in consulting. I think like there's a lot of experience to be gained in that, isn't there? Because you're working, I suppose, with lots of different companies and kind of seeing how they work and what works to kind of help them. And I think, like you said, it's like you got approached by universities, which is great as well. To work with them, and it's kind of like I suppose you just kind of thought, well, there's something here. People
Sure.
wanted me to speak and deliver this.
Yeah, no, it's an interesting point of view, Adam, that I've been fortunate because the more that I started to work with a variety of different organizations, industries, people, I've spent a lot of time working internationally in different markets, and so at a certain period of time, look, the truth be told, there's so much yet for me to learn and know and grow, right? So it's not like I've mastered or got a lock on knowledge. However, I've been around the block, so to speak, and I see the same patterns, and I bring that kind of very perspective, having seen different people in similar situations. That I know that's why people hire me is I have that sort of wisdom, if you will, to impart to others. which has been really fun
Mm.
to have that kind of wide spectrum of experience.
Yeah. No, definitely. I love that. And I think like, in the day, in the world that we live in now, I think like, like PR, consulting, business, networking, relationships, it all kind of, they kind of all interconnect, don't they? I think. And I think like it's very much needed in the world today, isn't it? To have that, um, all of that together. And, like for consulting, to kind of have it in like a nutshell, like what is it like involved? Like kind of if it kind of capsulate what
Sure.
consulting is.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. People often ask that, and I do go into some length in my program to
Yeah.
explain. In a traditional sense, consulting is to provide advice or expertise to another person. So somebody, let's say it's you're trying a company that's looking to become more digital, or looking to come up with new products or services that helps them to be competitive. They are getting an external resource who has certain knowledge or expertise in a particular area. So that's what I call sort of business currency. But my definition of consulting is it's more than that. It is a more conscious and disciplined approach to providing positive change.
Mm.
So you're not only bringing knowledge on the business level or whatever problem you're helping another company or individual solve for, but you're getting them to adopt new behaviors, change the way they're thinking about their customers or their marketplace, helping them to not just the old adage, teach a man, give somebody a fish versus you want to teach them how to fish, right? So a
Yeah.
consultant is also trying to create, impart skill and capabilities so that they wouldn't necessarily always have to rely on the consultant. And
Mm.
then why I said positive, the most successful consultants, in my opinion, are the ones who not only master their business trade craft, but the social currency.
Mm.
How they're able to influence, build relationships, be more empathetic. These sorts of things I think are essential to a consultant's success.
Yeah, I think that's really, really key you mentioned, and it makes more kind of sense to me because it's quite new to me, kind of what consultancy is. Like since I reconnected, I've been looking a bit more into it, and I think, like you said, that patience and really kind of having that empathy for the people you're working with, isn't it? Because I suppose like a lot of businesses out there, um, I mean, they're very kind of go go go, and if you want to have that good relationship with the people, you really kind of need to have that understanding, that empathy to listen to them, and I suppose for them to listen as well, and to kind of be accountable for what they're doing or what needs to change. Because I think from articles that I've seen in the media and things like that, that some companies kind of find it hard to change, or they kind of, have you kind of come across that, like kind of companies that,
Oh yeah, yeah, like all the time. Um, people, you were when somebody employs you, so somebody decides that maybe it would be time for us to get some outside perspective. So
mm,
obviously, any organization, they have a certain knowledge and expertise. They've got their own sort of wisdom. But if you're trying to get a fresh perspective, they're often attracted to a person like myself to say, hey, give us your experience. You've worked with this, you've worked with our competitors, you've worked with other industries. Tell us what you think. And so as a consultant, there, nothing is more satisfying when not only obviously you get paid for what you do, but the affecting some positive change, and that they adopt your suggestions or solutions or capabilities or services. But the truth be told, there is they don't always do that. They are often resistant to the change. So you suggest things, and then you find that's not going to work in our environment. We've tried that before. You get that kind of usual roadblock.
yeah.
So you're absolutely right. There's oftentimes, which can be frustrating for the consultant, is
Mm.
you put so much of your effort into the relationship and then you see no change. that could be very dissatisfying.
Yeah. And I think as well, like they kind of need to be accountable because they probably pay, a certain amount of money to for people's services because you have to go in there and spend time with them and look at what's happening. So it's, you know, I think like it's so important in the world today, isn't it, to to be accountable and to want to change and to be open to what other consultants have to say. Um, and I think, do you think like during COVID, there's been I suppose a lot of increase in businesses kind of needing consulting because of looking at different ways to adapt. Do you think?
Well, sure. I mean, yes and maybe no. I mean, it depends
Yeah.
maybe in terms of what
What business?
circumstances, right? The industry. I mean, on one hand, historically, just giving you perspective, we've had advisors, and I even talk about this in my program since like Machiavelli.
Mm,
Machiavelli was the sort of behind the scenes advisor to princesses and kings, in the
yeah.
1500s in Italy. That was what I would consider a modern day consultant, and they would travel to these different municipalities providing perspective and advice on how a lord or king could govern, right?
Yeah.
Well, historically, consultants like myself would travel to their clients. They sort of become embedded in a system and a work culture and system for a while, and that was really quite effective. Now with everything that's going on and we're more virtual, um, I've seen a uptick in wanting external resources, not just to provide advice, but like really roll up your sleeves, hands. Like they are looking to consultants like myself again to not just, hey, let me tell you, give you my 3x5 card of principles of success.
Yeah.
They're asking you to say, hey, could you help us do these things? Could you implement these things? And when you're not having to worry so much about travel costs or hotel and lodging and all these things that would
Mm,
typically be associated with consulting fees, it's inexpensive model, if you will, relatively speaking, to get
mm,
short-term, temporary, extra work and pair of hands, so to speak.
yeah.
Make
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah. Makes perfect sense. Yeah. And I think like with that, um, I think like with businesses, I think it's a really good thing that's in place for them, isn't it? If they want help and they're struggling with something, and I think like as well, there's a lot of competition out there in business. So I think so. My dog's outside. Um, it's vital, that they kind of sorry for that noise. That they kind of move move forward to want help. But like with the book that you have, like kind of how did you kind of come about doing that as well? Like
Yeah, so my trade craft, and when I say trade craft, that's like my secret sauce or superpowers. The
mm,
subject matter that I know most about is an area of what they call creativity, critical thinking, innovation, or design thinking. Design thinking became very much in vogue, back like 2005 and beyond, right?
mm,
When I was still in corporate world, I had responsibility for driving innovation for the company I was working with. It was Pfizer Consumer Healthcare, where we were looking to come up with new products, new ways of engaging our customers, and also internally, how do you build a more creative, innovative culture and mindset in the organization?
mm,
And that experience led me to make some observations and saying, what are some of the underlying habits and behaviors of innovators or creative people? And that kind of gave myself and my co-author, Janine McGlade, the sort of the spark ourselves, the genesis of, hey, there are certain characteristics that help enable people to be more innovative than others.
mm,
What is it about a Steve Jobs back in the day that made him so creative, or what was it about some of these early pioneers who were really brilliant innovators? What were some of the underlying habits? And so we wrote the book Stimulated on the premise that in order to spark creative ideas and come up with, those moments when either you're on a walk or a run or in the shower or at a
Yeah.
cafe, all of a sudden, boom, I get
Yeah.
$1 million idea. We said that you have to cultivate that kind of stimulus and continue to, apply certain set of habits that will
Mm,
spark, more likely than not, fresh new ideas, breakthrough new ideas. And to make it a habit as opposed to a once in a while occurrence is
mm.
what gave birth to that. So we wrote Stimulated, did very well, kind of really was the sort of foundation of our business, and had great fun, talking about it and promoting it.
That's awesome. And
Yeah.
I really like that. I must have been interested, researching and probably interviewing people to kind of like get, information and look at, why what kind of makes people like that way. And I think, when you mention that kind of creativity and that kind of, when you get ideas, it's a bit like a muscle, isn't it? I think like when you kind of work on it, it kind of becomes more kind of frequent over time. And it's like you said, whether you're in the shower or sometimes I've been laying in bed and then something comes to me and I'm like, oh, I need to just jot that down. Or it's really, really fascinating how, the human mind kind of works. And you see
Mhm.
people like Steve Jobs and trying to think of some other people like Elon Musk and
Yeah, they're immersive. Like take Elon Musk. That guy is like the method actor of innovation. I mean,
mm,
he dressed in, sometimes, on the surface, I don't know him personally, but
yeah,
you can tell he just is whatever he's working on. He's sort of all in, and that is one of the characteristics we found repeatedly is that people cultivating a set of conditions, anything from your physical environment where you work, who you interact with, how you conduct your day, to the kind of information you absorb and ingest, which, back to something earlier you brought up, we are dealing with an unprecedented and difficult, challenging time,
mm,
and many of us have been operating in isolation. And
mm,
I wonder, this is just a speculation, to what extent will that dampen some innovations or creativity, or for those who are already conditioned, who have that kind of muscle, to your point,
mm,
exercise it regularly, it
yeah,
may result in some amazing new breakthroughs and ideas. But
yeah,
the key, like you said, is you got to exercise it.
mm,
Otherwise, that creative muscle will atrophy.
mm. Yeah, definitely. I think thinking about my personal experience, I think for the past year from doing the podcast, it's kind of, I think doing this has been a bit of a muscle. It's like, working on a muscle, to be honest. I think like doing it, thinking of ideas and things kind of popping up, if that makes sense. Like, have
Yeah.
you found that with doing your like kind of podcast and
Yeah,
work and
yeah, yeah, and that's uh, the exciting piece is always learning,
mm,
in trying to. I mean, it's a tension between wanting to be a perfectionist. You and I talked
yeah,
for the recording. It's like, how do you improve the sound, the quality of the experience? And yet at the same time, my brand is unplugged. I love just more free flowing, casual conversation, because I think
yeah,
is more real than it. Otherwise, it gets too wooden, right? I'm
yeah,
not on some national broadcast station that has to be, really structured.
yeah,
Um, but I've been learning a lot, of course. But what's especially stimulating to me is meeting new people like yourself,
mm,
learning more about the process of broadcasting, not only from the front end piece of having conversations like this, but the back end. And like, holy smokes! All right, now that I have this, how do you leverage it? All the backlinks, and of course,
yeah,
interested in improving your ratings and all those sorts of things.
yeah. It's a very creative process, isn't it? And learning process. And I think I mean, a lot of time does go into it. So I think everyone who has a podcast, or who does this, everyone's got different commitments and different time frames and all of that. But I think is a lot of time goes into it, and I think there's so many ways of kind of putting it out there. There's um, so many narratives to it, and I think, like you said, we were saying about perfectionism. Sometimes we can create something and have an idea, do it, put it out, and then you're like, oh no, I could have done this, and then you've shipped it out, and then you just have to kind of go with it. And I
Well,
think, yeah,
yeah, no, it's exactly right. So when Janine McGlade and I wrote Stimulated, it make no mistake, writing a book, and you know, I've
yeah,
written others since. It is a labor of love. It's just a bitch at times to just you know, to just go through that process. You know, the initial stages when you're developing it, interviewing people, that's the fun, exciting part. But there's a moment in time, it's like, this is really hard work, getting edited,
yeah,
like, oh my God, why did I even bother? To the point where you're like so sick of it. I mean, that's the
yeah,
reality. And
yeah,
then all of a sudden when you produce that, it's like it's so exciting. There's a
mm,
momentary excitement. And then to your point, then all of a sudden you say, oh, I wish I would have talked about this, or I would have done
yeah,
this instead. And so you end up like kind of rewriting, recreating it the moment that you've produced it. And I think
mm,
this is true of almost every, we talk about Picasso, for example, in our
yeah,
book, Stimulated, where I don't know, he had tens of thousands of pieces of art, of which maybe, I don't know, 10% of that were truly masterpieces. But that didn't stop him from all those sort of dog paintings. And I'm sure there you could fetch a lot of money for those dog paintings now, right? But he practiced and practiced and practiced all the time. um, it wasn't just like he just got a canvas and just created a masterpiece from nothing. He was
yeah.
he was devoted to the exercise of the creative process.
I think that I really agree with that, and I think it's kind of part of that process, as you mentioned. Writing a book and with a lot of things, there's going to be times where it's really hard. And you're not the only person to tell me that writing a book's like really difficult, and there's moments like that. And I think but I think does it. I suppose it makes you appreciate the kind of final product. Kind of going through all that and kind of overcoming that, and kind of completing it. And I think like with art, like as well, there's an element to it as well. And I think even with sometimes editing podcasts or certain times, I've uploaded things and then it doesn't upload properly or something goes wrong, and then you're like, I've just spent an hour doing that and I can't get that time back, and then you. But yeah, you just have to keep on going. And I quite like the picture in the background. I know we spoke about that when we met.
Yeah, the Beatles. You know, I love music. That's one of the things that we talk about.
Yeah.
Is music is a great stimulus. So
Mm,
for many years now, from the early days when I got into this kind of work around creativity and innovation, anytime anyone would come to one of my seminars or workshops, I always had music playing. It's a form of energy. It helps spark creativity, imagination. It relaxes people. You can't do this kind of innovation like work if you're, you know, tense.
mm,
And so I'm a big music guy of all sorts of facets. Obviously, the Beatles are a classic
yeah.
band. Um, Not to mention
It's,
artwork. You know, the artwork that you're talking about is
mm,
artists and kind of like it. So
yeah, it's awesome. I think there's, like I said, that energy to music and that like a frequency to it. And even with art and painting, there's that kind of energy with it. And energy has gone into making that, and it's kind of there. And it can, music and art can really kind of alter your emotional state, can't it? It can really shift you sometimes. And it's like the clip I saw on your website, where you're talking about what you do in consulting. I really like the is it piano or I think it's a violin or piano. It's really kind of upbeat, and
yeah,
it kind of gets you engaged. And that's what I felt engaged, from that music in the background. So it's quite powerful how music really works and art and all these kind of creative processes. And I was thinking about Jimi Hendrix, Jimi Hendrix's
oh
music,
yeah,
but
I love
I
Jimi Hendrix.
some of his music really kind of like, oh my god, it's so deep.
Yeah, no. Well, and that's just it. And again, each of these, when you think of stay with that kind of sort of music
Yeah.
artist level, many of them, you see them on stage, and they're incredible personas and accomplished musicians. What you don't see is all the blood, sweat, and tears behind it that they
Yeah.
had to do. I mean, Jimi Hendrix, was another good example, somebody who practiced his trade craft often. And I'm sure there were moments in his, as well as other musicians who followed, those setbacks.
Mm,
But when you're passionate about it and you continue to work at your craft, that gives you the level of confidence where it just becomes who you are. It's so internalized at that point.
mm.
Um,
Yeah.
so
It's powerful, isn't it? And I think I've spoken to a few people who are like kind of in that industry, and I remember one guy said to me, he might go to the studio for 8 hours, and he might not make anything. He's just kind of
right.
played around with stuff.
Yeah, well, there you go. That's exactly right. And so one of the things I talked about, in fact, I posted on this just today.
Mm,
And one of the power skills I talk about in my course is called compounding your energy. So think of an
mm,
investment. If you're
mm,
looking to grow your portfolio money, the more that you put in on a regular basis, it compounds, right? Over a period of time. It may not seem, it may be very incremental, but it just will increase in value,
mm,
on regular sort of disciplined sort of action toward
mm,
it, right? Well, the same is true about your own sort of mental state and energy, physical, emotional, spiritual, whatever how you ever want to define that. The more you invest in that sort of your energetic self, the more that you will compound that time is irrelevant.
mm,
Tony Schwartz, who is a favorite author of mine from years ago, wrote a book called, you need to manage your energy, not your time. We all have
mm,
about the same time. Yeah, some people are busier than others, of course, right? But time is finite. It's the energy that's infinite. And
mm,
so the more that you can invest in your energetic creative self, if you will, the more likely you're going to accomplish bigger and better things. That's why at times we get, when life happens, we get distracted. We commit to things that just take away our energy. We get depleted. We're not rested. All these sort of things can conspire against that. And all of a sudden we say, shit, I can't, accomplish anything
yeah.
because I'm just in this horrible energetic state. So to me, an effective consultant or professional entrepreneur and innovator, if you invest in that energetic state of yourself, the more likely you're going to be more impactful,
Mm,
and it grows.
mm,
That's why you can see, again, back to musicians, like when they step on stage, you're like, wow, this guy, played for 3 hours straight. I
yeah.
remember seeing Billy Joel, another great here in New York
Wow.
where I live. He played for 3 hours straight, and
Oh, 3 hours. Oh my God.
yeah, I mean, I think, he might have had one break, which was kind of cool. At one point, in one of the concerts, he did what he calls fielder's choice. So he just asked the audience, uh, you know, I'm going to give you three choices of music in my library of music. You choose based on audience clapping, and then he would play it. I mean, that just shows you could just do it right on a dime. But then at one
Wow.
point, he brought out one of his roadies, and they played something from AC/DC, which was great. Uh,
Yeah.
Showed his versatility. But it's that level of energy that he brings to the
Mm,
performance is the same ethos that I want consultants whom I am now working with to bring. What's
mm,
your energetic sort of mojo that you want to bring
yeah.
to your stage of work?
No, I love that. I love that, and I think that's really important. And I agree, and I think energy, like you said, everyone's got 24 hours in a day or whatever, and it's that energy, isn't it? That is the time's finite, but like that energy is you know kind of always there, but depends on what you put that energy into is going to affect you, isn't it? And you're gonna have. I mean, sometimes people have off days. That's normal. But I think sometimes, like if you want to show up and be the best that you can be, or your most effective self, you kind of. I think kind of when we're in podcasting, like me and yourself, you you have to kind of be on form for what you're doing,
Oh
and
yeah.
it's like some days, I like to have a few glasses of wine, sometimes like during the weekend, but or whatever. But if I've got a podcast, I'll be like, I can't go to bed at this time, and I've because I don't. It's not fair on me. It's not fair on the other person. And I think when you become really mindful of your energy and what your energy is going into, is really important to kind of be in that mindful place. And I mean, we all do things, don't we? We might go to bed too late or whatever, but um, and that's okay. But I think like it's really vital what you mentioned because if you're working with a company or you're consulting, you want to be on form. They need to kind of show that kind of good energy to kind of fuse that kind of relationship, I suppose.
You bingo, you nailed it because there was a time I do that certainly in this past year because of the circumstances at hand in terms of travel. But boy,
Yeah.
I used to be gone when I at my sort of zenith of consulting with a number of different clients. I mean, I would be gone Monday through Friday, and you're in
Mm.
planes and airports and hotels and and you're with clients all day, you're presenting, you're listening, you're doing all sorts of
Yeah.
work associated in support of that. I would be exhausted by the time I get it home.
Yeah.
And so you know being, as you said, mindful and paying attention to that, and the ability to say no, because I'm a relationship guy. I love people.
Yeah.
I get a lot of my energy the more people I'm with.
Yeah.
However, I found over the years that I would have to say no to a client dinner, not unless it was really essential and we were working on something that was called for that. I'd say, "Hey guys, I love you. I'll be
Yeah.
there for you the next day, but I've got to take care of myself so that I can be my best self." And that's not easy if you're affiliative and you feel like, oh, I have to be on all the time.
Mm.
Um, and that is sort of the reality of it. That the work we do is demanding,
Yeah.
but to be your most effective self, you do have to take care of yourself, and that sometimes
Yeah.
saying no or setting boundaries to certain circumstances. Uh,
Yeah.
uh, so, I mean, it's again back to this idea that the musical performer, they have to. I forget what movie it was. I think
I
oh
might know.
yeah, it's oh, I'm trying to think of the Marky Mark was the who's the guy? It was
Michael
called Rock.
Wahlberg. Mark Wahlberg. Mark Wahlberg.
Yeah, Mark Wahlberg. He did a thing on.
Marky.
I know, I know. I liked it. That was his back when he was just the underwear model. But he did this movie called Rock and Roll, and I love that
Yeah.
movie. Or I think it's Rockstar. That's it.
Mm.
Anyhow, there's a scene where before the character portrayed by Mark Wahlberg uh, becomes the lead singer. The lead singer of the former band is really like pissed off. He said, you don't think this just happens instantly and magically that I'm a good singer. I work at my
Mm.
craft. And I think that was such a poignant scene in the movie because that's absolutely true. Even rock stars, whom we sometimes think, oh, all they do is party and have this
Mm.
glamorous lifestyle, the better ones and the ones who are able to sustain themselves. Look at Mick Jagger after all these years. He's in his 70s and the guy he can bring it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
That's
so
such a
again,
great point.
apply that mindset whether you are working at a lab in some research center, you're a coder for a big tech software company, or you're a big time advisor to top leaders. Think of your craft And how do you do it to make sure that you are well preserved so that you can perform at your best?
Yeah. No, I love that. I love that, and I think it's so important, as you mentioned, to be able to kind of conserve your energy. People will probably respect you more for setting those boundaries and being honest with yourself and saying no. Like, it can be difficult sometimes, I imagine, but I think like you gain that kind of respect. 'Cause people are like, yeah, he needs to have his own time to do X, Y, Z and recharge. And I think like for a lot of people, like in that industry, or like what you said, it can be applied to so many areas of your life and so many sectors of work. And I think you see this, like I said, in musicians, artists, actors, and they're on the go. And sometimes if they don't look after themselves, they can just burn out, or get if they get involved in whatever activities. I think like even with like stand up comedy, stand up comedians, their work ethic, and like you look at
Oh yeah.
like Kevin Hart,
Yeah.
and you think, wow, like um I saw like like a mini documentary, and he was like, he came from a rough place, and he started out from nowhere. And you think of like that, being on the ball, trying to, showing up and being the best on stage you can. And um I saw a freestyle as well, these kind of rap freestyles.
Yeah.
There was a guy who passed away not too long ago called Juice World, and he was a rapper, and he freestyled for like an hour straight. I think he did it, like, off the top of his head. And you think like, holy crap, like how many hours has he put in to be able to do that for an hour?
Uh,
It's it, it's
it,
crazy.
I know. I love this. So like that that you're speaking my language because again, music as a metaphor. Steven Tyler, um, uh, Eminem, these guys,
Yeah,
they constantly are working with words. They're playing around with words, and they look in the dictionary. That's again back to sort of the work that we did early on with corporate professionals.
yeah,
We studied their habits. What did they do? One of the guys that I worked with very closely and interviewed for our book in Stimulated, he I loved always having a meeting, and here was Manhattan, especially on a lovely spring day.
yeah,
Instead of going and sitting on his office where the energy is low and the four walls, no light coming
yeah,
in, say, hey, let's go outside. Let's go to Bryant Park, or hey, let's talk while we see this new exhibit at the MoMA. Yeah,
yeah,
and it was always one of the most interesting, stimulating conversations because you get this just expansiveness, the energy of the city, even the noise. There was
mm,
something about the combination of those conditions that would always make my interaction with him the most profound and memorable versus a
yeah,
typical business meeting like. And nowadays, can you imagine Zoom fatigue and all that? It's just horrible.
yeah, 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 definitely. I can definitely relate to that because like I think I said to you, I went to New York like last year, and it was really really cold. But the but yeah, there's that vibe to it, and I really resonate with that. And I think when I was going for walks with my friend, looking around, and like compared to like being in an office, like you said, having a chat, being out in the open, being around what's going on, it's a different energy shift, isn't there? And I think we're like deep down, we're not designed to kind of stay in those boxes, kind of boxes. We need to get out to be a part of what's going on around us. So I think it's really good that you was able to kind of do that. And
Sure.
I
And
suppose, yeah,
yeah, and Adam, that's what I'm sure you and many of your listeners and other people who join your show are wondering, like, all right, what's sort of how are we evolving? What's the workplace of the future? And certainly what this experience showed is the incredible, thanks to technology and such, that we were able to stay connected, and it
mm,
shows incredible efficiency, and in some many positive ways, you can even increase the scale and
yeah,
way in which you connect with people. At the same time, it's not a complete, and in some cases I would say poor substitute for really good quality human interaction and creativity. And so I really do hope, and I believe we will because that's just who we are. We're social animals, and therefore we should be connecting in person. Um, I think you froze a little bit there.
My phone overheated. That's good, isn't
Yeah,
it? I can't wait to get an iPhone again. Oh, this phone.
yeah, I know. Well, there you go. Well, just as I was talking about technology, there is a
I'll,
perfect.
I'll just I'll just continue. Yeah, I'll continue now. Yeah, so the phone, my phone overheated, but you was talking about like technology and
Yeah, so there's a blessing and a burden. I mean, and the blessing is it, enables us to stay connected and share information. So I think it's so important to just sum that up is as we
mm,
progress into a sort of a new chapter as a human, you know, kind, we
yeah,
need to be mindful of how we use technology to its fullest potential, the way in which we connect, but not to overplay it, not to use it as a complete substitute for human interaction. Because the word you used earlier, shift, I think when you are around, surrounded in person with people, you elevate and shift the energy. That is so
yeah,
essential to who we are because we're social beings. Is
mm,
point I was trying to make. So I think finding the right balance between. I years ago in my graduate work, um,
yeah,
I learned about this concept of what they called socio-technical systems. How do you optimize the technology and the work system versus
yeah,
the social, informal, intangible way in which we interact as human beings, right? And
mm,
so you want to jointly optimize those two things.
mm. That's a really deep word. It's an amazing word. I I think it's so true though, isn't it? I think like it's kind of striking that balance, I suppose, between this and um working in person with people. And I mean, I think when you do Zoom calls, you're interacting with someone, so there is that element of energy exchange and interaction. But I think when you're with people in person in groups, there it's much more kind of significant and very very different. And
Right.
I suppose you saw that in your work as well.
Yeah, no, it's a sensory experience. I mean, this was once shared with me, and I like this sort of explanation you used. You said you have a glass of
Yeah,
wine. Part of the reason why you clink glasses is for a host of reasons. One, you have the senses, full sensory experiences that you see the wine, the color of the wine,
yeah,
you get the fragrance, you get that, then you have the taste of that, but then you don't have the auditory experience of it. So you clink the glasses, and so the vibration of the glass, especially when it hits another glass, is tunes into one another. It creates
yeah,
that sort of vibrational resonance with one person and the other. And then if it's surrounded by a nice restaurant and food and friendships and whatever else,
yeah,
then it leaves this indelible memory into
mm,
our experience that creates a warm positive feeling. So
yeah.
yeah, the chemical, the alcohol maybe makes you a little bit looser or whatever. That's of course fun, but it is more than that, right?
mm,
So that's what's so, I think, essential as we think about the work we do as professionals, be it consulting or podcasting or whatever. How do you
yeah,
create that total sensory experience?
mm. Definitely. That's a real point you mentioned, and I think I can definitely relate to that from when I worked in hotels in the past and being in that experience of, sometimes we'd have live music playing, and then you got people talking, the noises, seeing people have a nice, the smells, the noise, the
Yeah.
location, it's all kind of like a mix. And at the time, I think when I was in that, I didn't really think about all of those things, but like thinking about it now you say it, it kind of concretes those kind of bad memories, doesn't it, of that experience.
Sure.
If you take away some of those things, it's like, okay,
Yeah, exactly. Marcel Proust, who's the French poet, used to talk about it, that became the Proustian
yeah,
effect when he would have you smell his mother's cookies being baked. They would always conjure up nice, fond memories of him spending time with her. It's that experience and creates this association.
yeah,
So so important to our human experience.
yeah. No, definitely, definitely. And I was just thinking, like, where can people find you on like your website, like social media, your
Sure.
services?
Yeah, thanks for asking me,
No, you're
Adam.
welcome.
I have my Consulting Unplugged platform. There's a couple different places. Consulting Unplugged is where I do my podcast. It's consultingunplugged.com. Easy to find. Where I host a lot of interesting people like yourself, authors, innovators, executives, creatives. Just to bring that kind of storytelling about their experiences and their backstory about consulting or being a transformational leader. So Consulting Unplugged is a great place. That's where you can get more information about programs. I also have my business, a design firm called DXD Partners. You can go there as well. And then social media, LinkedIn. I use that a lot. I know I need to do a little more on Facebook and Instagram. I will eventually, but LinkedIn, obviously under Andrew Peck, Pek. It's a good place to find me. Certainly welcome anyone to my network and happy to accept their invitation.
No, awesome, Andrew. Awesome. And like, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you, and I've
Yeah.
had a really great time. And I really, I wish you all the best in, everything that you're doing. And also people can find your book on Amazon, right? It's on Amazon as
Yeah,
well.
yeah, you can find my book, Stimulated Habits to Spark Your Creative Genius at Work, as well as other books that I have there too on my website. But Amazon, yeah, you can get it
Yeah.
in all sorts of forms.
Yeah. No, awesome. Awesome. But no,
Yeah,
I wish you continued success in all that you're doing. And yeah, I look forward to connecting again soon.
yeah, likewise, likewise. Thanks for having me on. Great
No, you're
connecting,
welcome.
and best of luck to you as well.
No, cheers, man. Cheers. I really, really appreciate it. Really grateful for this. Thank you.
You bet. All right,
So.
cheers.